My most watched video on all of my channel, living in Fort Collins, is my OG pros and cons video that I shot nearly 5 years ago. Now that being said, each year as we progress through life and cities grow or shrink, there are new pros and cons that come about. So today I am talking to you about 2025 specifically pros and cons of living in Fort Collins, Colorado. What's up everybody? My name is Patrick Soukup and this is the Living in Fort Collins YouTube channel where you come to learn everything there is to know about Fort Collins in Northern Colorado. Eating, sleeping, playing, working, and pros and cons. Now, if you're considering relocating to the area, we have helped hundreds of families move and give my team and I a call, text, or email, and we would love to be an asset on your team with that relocation. Now, if you're buying, selling, or investing here in Northern Colorado, we are licensed real estate agents. Now, without any further delays, and make sure to stick around till the end of the video as we will kind of go rapid fire with some of the OG pros and cons that we've updated, kept in fresh, and that will be at the end of the video. But 2025 pros and cons, let's go. All right, we've got 7 pros and 4 cons that we're gonna hit on. And number 1 is we are a platinum rated bike community here in Fort Collins. We have 45 miles of paved trails throughout Fort Collins, but we have slated with our new strategic trails plan, 71 additional paved miles. Now, a lot of these are gonna take place on the northeast side of Fort Collins, but there's gonna be some on the south side along Carpenter Road connecting 30+ mile loops that will be available. And this year, we'll actually have the 45-mile stretch completed of the Pooter Trail from Bellevue to Greeley. So our strategic trails map, when people come here, live in Fort Collins in Northern Colorado, the lifestyle, being outdoors is paramount, and the paved trail system is something special. Number 2, and we're actually gonna hit on this as one of the cons as well, sneak peek, but is the 2050 half-cent sales tax. It was passed last year and it's called the 2050 sales tax because it's gonna be in place for the next 25 years. Now what this does is increase our sales tax by 0.5%, so just over 8% for our city sales tax. And essentially that is a dedicated tax to 3 things. Half of that's gonna go to parks and recreation, a quarter of that is going to go to transit, and a quarter of that is gonna go to climate control. It's something super special. We actually had Mike Calhoun, Parks Director, on our podcast, The Fort Collins Fellas, and he said at the time, before this tax was passed, that our infrastructure was aging in place. We have 43 neighborhood parks and 7 community parks, just under 1,000 acres of parks throughout Fort Collins, and it's a huge asset, but also a big liability. There's a lot of cost and maintenance that comes up with that. So to keep these things great, to keep them safe, up to date, operational and functional, we passed the 2050 sales tax, and it passed with flying colors, tons of support, but yes, it did increase our cost of living by our sales tax going just above 8%. So we'll get to that here as we get to the cons. Number 3, the housing market stability. Now, Fort Collins historically has seen 5 to 5.5% appreciation annually since the mid-70s. Now, we had a couple of years that were absolutely crazy, 2020, 21, and early 2022. We saw double-digit appreciation for houses. Housing prices went skyrocketing. But over the last year, essentially since middle of 2022, we've seen, for all intensive purposes, flatlining of prices. And if you bought a house in 2022, of course, you might not be super stoked about that unless your plans are to live in that house for 6, 7, 10+ years, then you don't necessarily care too much because you're paying down that principal, and we will get back to some of that appreciation here sooner than later. But as one of my friends and someone who's moved from California told me, is a recursion to the mean. So we're seeing this flatlining that we have seen over the last couple of years. Yes, we've seen a little bit of increase, about 1% or 2% over the last 2.5 years. But generally speaking, it's been relatively flatlined since mid-2022 for incomes to increase, for our average to get back to a little bit more normal of 5 to 5.5%. And so in the future years, we will see that, but at least for the last couple of years, we've had an opportunity for incomes to increase while housing prices have generally remained relatively flat. And as of February 15th, 2025, a new law in Fort Collins, because of the Colorado House bill that passed, now allows any and every lot in Fort Collins that has a single family unit on it can now build an ADU. Now there are specific requirements, setbacks, design standards, height limitations, square footage limitations, but generally speaking, if you own a property that has a single family house on it, you can build an ADU, an accessory dwelling unit. Now this bill was passed in Colorado in 2024, but becomes law or requires jurisdictions to update their zoning codes by June 30th, 2025. And Fort Collins is on track, ahead of track, already taken care of it, but as of February 15th, 2025, that ADU law became official law in Fort Collins. And some people might get concerned about parking and density and all of a sudden becoming crowded and nuisances. And I don't know what the answer is. I do think that there are great housing opportunities to be built on specific lots where ADUs make sense, bigger lots. They could fit an ADU, there's parking available, there's off-street parking garages, but there could be some disruption in neighborhoods, and that's to be seen. I will say the biggest hurdle from my perspective is the cost to build these ADUs. I don't see it going for much less than $150,000, but probably could exceed $200,000+ when you talk about fees, permit, construction costs, timeline. And so people are gonna have to overcome this hurdle of how do I finance it? Do I take a HELOC out? Do I go, put down cash that I've got, or do I pull out of an investment account? But I don't think it's just a simple, hey, I want to build an ADU on my house and bang, bang, boom, I'm going to get it done for $50,000. I don't think that's going to happen. So I do wonder how many individuals will actually build ADUs, even though they are allowed to build an ADU on their lot. So that's a pro for me because it's able to optimize and maximize the use of your land if you so desire. Move your mom in there, retirement, maybe a kid that's coming home from college, or if you're on a fixed income and want to make some additional rental income, it's one of the few places where it makes sense to, let's say, invest $150,000 and get $1,500 a month on rent. That's the 1% rule that I like to live by. I can talk to you more about renting and investing. If you'd like, feel free to reach out to me and ask, but those numbers do pencil. So there are opportunities on the investment side as well. But being able to build an ADU on a single family lot anywhere in Colorado that has a jurisdiction of above 1,000 people is now law. And in Fort Collins, as of February 15th, it is active. Number 5, now this is kind of an interesting one because we have actually produced over 60 episodes on the Fort Collins Fellows and have had the ability to talk to movers and shakers in Fort Collins and Northern Colorado. And probably a common thread among many of these movers and shakers is how engaged and invested they are in the Fort Collins and Northern Colorado community, giving back when nothing is necessarily being asked of them, providing volunteer opportunities, giving financially, but essentially they see Fort Collins and Northern Colorado as an opportunity to put their time, energy, and effort into that returns to them their wonderful lifestyle. So I would say the community engagement and focus on giving back, being a good steward, and a good resident and citizen of Fort Collins and Northern Colorado is something that I think I take for granted. But after talking to those 60 individuals on the Fort Collins Fellows, it's not uncommon for people to absolutely love living here and want to give back time, energy, effort, and finances. Number 6, now we are a growing community generally. Fort Collins population has kind of stagnated as well, but the surrounding area, Northern Colorado, which is Larimer and Weld County, has grown pretty substantially over the last decade. And with that comes amenities and developments, like the Southeast Community Center that's been promised to us for years. It's gonna be a $90 to $100 million project that's been approved, funded. It's just a matter of getting design, choosing contractors, construction crews, and getting that going over by Fossil Ridge High School. This is gonna have multiple pools, basketball courts, workout, community gathering, public library. It's something that's super exciting on the southeast side of town. And then as you go on to the northeast, Montava will break ground on one of their first phases of a 25-year phase development in northeast Fort Collins. It's been a long time coming, but we're excited to see shovels in the dirt and that northeast side really start to take shape now and over the next 25 years. Bloom on Mulberry is offering an affordable option. Affordable, okay? Now we'll talk about cost of living here shortly in cons, but affordable for homes, single family homes under $500,000. In fact, we purchased a couple of homes as an investment property, and it's a great opportunity to own a single family detached house for under $500,000. And then Midtown is starting to take shape. King Soopers opened up at the end of January, and it is a world-class facility. It got rid of what was there, a Kmart that had been basically abandoned for over a decade. And then we're gonna see on the south side of Drake and College, more redevelopment. There's gonna be gas stations. There's 4 different plots of land that are gonna be redeveloped there. That was a Spradley Bar Mazda that is now a vacant lot, but going to be redeveloped. And so the midtown of Fort Collins is really starting to take shape and beautify here in 2025. We're excited for 3 pickleball courts to take shape. 2 of them here in 2025, but the next one will probably be in 2026, which is actually gonna be built by the city of Fort Collins at Fossil Creek Park, which is out my back door, which maybe the noise will be a little bit of a nuisance, but there are a lot of pickleball players here in Northern Colorado, and there is going to be 3 different facilities, 1 outdoor, 2 indoor, and the 1 indoor also has an outdoor and indoor option. But those are gonna be exciting for people to come here. And then from there, Mulberry and I-25, one of the gateways to Fort Collins that really isn't super sexy. When we were talking as a city about annexing parts of Mulberry or the entirety of Mulberry into Fort Collins, there was a conversation that overnight our call volume for our police department would increase by 50% if we annexed the entirety of that Mulberry and I-25 corridor. So it's not to say that that's gonna go away with this project, but there are different projects that are taking shape, like Rudolph Farms on Prospect and I-25. Mulberry and I-25 is getting, at least has a priority for Colorado Department of Transportation, CDOT, to do a $60 million bridge overpass renovation project. And I will say, it's just kind of one of those dominoes that starts to fall. And before long, we'll see some of those maybe less than desirable operated locations, because I wouldn't say Waffle House is terrible, but Waffle House comes with Waffle House maybe stereotypes. I don't know if that's the right word, but essentially one domino to fall. We had Woodward Governor that built their headquarters there. We've got a $60 million overpass. We've got the Bloom development happening on Mulberry. I'm excited about Mulberry now and into the future. Now there are plenty other developments that are happening in Fort Collins in and around in 2025 and beyond, but those are some of the biggest ones that bring excitement to my mind. In our final pro, number 7, CSU is going to be moving to the Pac-12. Now the Pac-12 is a shell of its former self, but it still carries a pretty strong name. And Colorado State University hopefully can get through some of these interesting times with research, funding, grants, loans, federal loans, but Colorado State University is absolutely the backbone of Fort Collins, so we need it to continue to be healthy. And with leadership like Amy Parsons and John Weber, Amy Parsons our president, John Weber our AD, making these very exciting moves such to the Pac-12 and bringing really exciting things to CSU, it's just a great thing to see. There's energy, there's opportunity. Gonzaga's gonna be in our basketball division, which, I mean, they're a annual top 10 basketball team. So Fort Collins and CSU making moves into the Pac-12 is definitely something exciting. Now we are getting into the cons. Now these are cons from my perspective in Fort Collins in 2025. But number 1, our rental registration. Now you could see this as a pro or a con. Now obviously one thing that I thoroughly believe is that bad landlords should be dealt with. And there has been plenty of opportunity for landlords to take advantage of small supply of rentals and a large pool of renters, and maybe use scare tactics of, if you report me, I won't renew your lease, or I will increase your rent twofold. And renters, whether they know better or not, were scared. And this is not Fort Collins, this is across the country. I'm just saying in general. But Fort Collins put in a rental registration. And the reason why I have this as a con is because I think, generally speaking, most landlords are pretty decent actors. Now, you can argue with me on that. I'm sure there's a million different examples, or quite a few different examples of where landlords weren't acting awesome. But from my perspective, landlords in Fort Collins are generally pretty good stewards of their properties. And what this has done is now added an expense to landlords, which could potentially result in future further expenses by way of forced inspections and things of that nature. But I looked at one of our credit card bills and I said, what's this $600 charge? And my assistant said, that's the rental registration fees that we're going to be paying on an annual basis. And so I just don't like that fee is, from my perspective, going to be pushed on, not just from me, but from multiple landlords onto the renters. And we are having increased cost of insurance and property taxes, rental registration. And then also we have our city-wide trash collector, which could have been on this list as pros and cons, but as a 2025 City of Fort Collins contracted with Republic to be the sole provider of our trash, and this was to help get climate, road congestion, climate, maybe save some dollars for people. But if you opt out, you owe $11 per month to Republic for that. So there are just these additional expenses that are getting pushed, and there's only so many dollars, and they're getting spread relatively thin. And the rental registration, I believe, is another one of those. But hopefully, on the bright side, it provides an avenue for renters who might not necessarily be in a great situation to communicate with the city saying, hey, there's some issues, please come and check this out. Number 2, enhancement of traffic control. Now, we had 6 red light traffic tickets, and I've gotten probably 2 or 3 red light tickets. But there was a bill that was passed in Colorado that essentially allows these technologies to now give speeding tickets. Now, these 6 red light cameras have become speed cameras as well. And I am seeing those flashing lights happen more often than not. They're projecting to see revenue increase in the city of Fort Collins from $1 million annually to nearly $3 or $4 million from these programs. In one of the intersections, Prospect and Shields, there was a month where there were 16,000 on average people speeding 11 plus miles per hour or over. Now, the reason why they're doing 11 miles an hour and over is because essentially they can't argue it at that point. The city has a Vision Zero, which is essentially 0 fatalities or serious injuries. And the way that they're going to try to curb that is by reducing speeding violators. And unfortunately, just recently, there was a motorcyclist who passed away in Fort Collins in an accident on College and Harmony. Super sad thing to see. But prior to that same exact day, I saw another motorcyclist weaving in and out of traffic, which is something that's concerning, and I think the city of Fort Collins has all of the right motives. It's not a huge revenue grab by them because all of the dollars that are generated from that $3 to $4 million are going to go back into traffic safety and safety of Fort Collins. But it's not going to be fun getting those speeding tickets, $75. There's going to be 2 AVIS systems, automatic vehicle information system, that are going to be placed along different corridors. You might see driving through Fort Collins that speeding enforcement with a camera on there is in place. So in Fort Collins, best not speed. Number 3, and I would say this has been on an OG video of Fort Collins, but I wanted to kind of go a little bit deeper, and that is the cost of living in Fort Collins. Fort Collins used to be a value buy. Early 1990s, mid 90s, you could find a wonderful place that is Fort Collins, Colorado, to move to and find a generally affordable house. Now, since the 2000s, when Fort Collins was listed as the best place to live and continues to go on different lists, from best town center, number 4, best brewery center, best places to retire and all those top 25s, best places to live still. We're perpetually on a top 50 list there. It's gotten to be on the map where people want to move and relocate to. And with that, our population's only right around 180,000 people. Our build out is essentially there. We only have so many places to build. One of the things that my uncle told me while growing up was that Fort Collins is a great investment because, well, you've got the mountains to your west, which is really this hard barrier. And the only ways to grow is north, south, or east. And so comparatively to different areas where they can just sprawl out in all 360 degrees, there's only 3 different directions that Fort Collins can grow. So there's this built-in supply constraint. But that being said, Fort Collins has become a more expensive place to live. And so cost of living has been a concern for those considering relocating or living here, moving, growing up here. And it hasn't gotten better in 2025. Like I said, our city sales tax went from 7.55% to 8.05% with the 2050 half-cent sales tax. From there, we also passed a $49 million mill levy for the Poudre School District in 2024 that takes place now in 2025. And what that essentially means to you as far as dollars is for every $100,000 of value, it's gonna cost you another $25 annually in property taxes. So for a $600,000 house, it's gonna cost you an extra $150 per year in property taxes. Now, the beautiful thing about that is it goes to support and essentially give us a longer runway on the Poudre School District so we don't have to close any schools because we are a little bit of an aging demographic. Our median age used to be 29, now is 39. People are aging in place longer and the growth is happening on the east side of towns. So some of these older, kind of more old Fort Collins elementaries are seeing their enrollment, their census decrease. And while that's not a great thing, there's still kids that are going there. And we want to keep those schools open and available and still provide world-class education along with arts, PE, music, and all of the core curriculum classes as well. But it came at a cost for the property taxpayers of Fort Collins. And then our utility rates are increasing as well. The city of Fort Collins actually is not too bad. The Fort Collins City Council kind of minimize that. They could have gone up quite a bit, but really what they wanted to focus on was more of a CPI type inflationary number of 6 to 7% for electric, stormwater, wastewater, and water for the city of Fort Collins. Now there's, I believe, 6 different water districts in the Fort Collins area. I'm in the Fort Collins Loveland Water District, and we are expected to see utility rates increase by 30%. Now, I did the calculation. We spent about $1,200 or $1,400 in 2024 on our water bill. So we're going to see about a $300 to $350 annual increase for our water bill. But again, just a little bit more pressure on cost of living by utility rates. And this final one, which isn't all encompassing because we could see eggs increase by 20%, the cost of food, just general cost of living, whether you're in Fort Collins or anywhere across the country, has increased. And that be grocery stores, restaurants, it's definitely a lot of pressures. But insurance costs in Fort Collins in Northern Colorado, what I saw is about a 10 to 15, even sometimes 20% increase on some of my properties that we've got on our annual renewals that have really just started coming up. And I did a compare contrast, and that is an additional cost for me as a property owner that just, again, puts a little bit more strain. Now, to the pro that I talked about earlier, we have seen a stabilization of property values, which does stabilize, except unless there's increase in mill levies, our property taxes. So for the next couple of years, when they do all of our reevaluations in 2025, we will see a stabilization for 4 years, essentially, of property taxes. So that's at least a little bit of a relief because we saw some major increases on our last round of property valuations when they were evaluating properties up to the month June 30th, 2022. Well, when you take into consideration some of the most high acceleration of appreciation was in 2020 and 2021, those values were a little bit of a sticker shock to people when they started paying their property taxes from the valuations in 2022 in 2023. And our final one, number 4, is something that I think is a conversation. It could be a pro, it could be a con. Now, we are going to be building a 38,000 square foot homeless shelter in the north side of town over by Hickory College Avenue, and the land's being provided by a Bohemian Foundation. So one of my pros earlier talking about people engaged community members, Pat Stryker and the Bohemian Foundation, $4 billion net worth, and the company just pours money and time, effort, and energy into Fort Collins, but they're going to be giving the land. And they've actually raised 24 of the $27 million already needed to build this facility. But it's going to be a 250-bed facility that's going to be located in North Fort Collins. Now, North Old Town, North College Avenue, a lot of those businesses have put a lot of money and investment, and they're not excited to see this homeless shelter because unfortunately with it comes some negative connotations and feelings, and the reality is some people don't have the best interest and might be using drugs. And you, if you're living there and have a young family or a single woman or man that are walking late at night, that could be something that's concerning for you if you're right in that area. And there's 3 mobile home parks that are right around there that are already kind of at risk, lower income families. And they're just really concerned as far as the city of Fort Collins, city council, like, hey, what are we doing? But it's got to go somewhere. Right now we have a 5,000 square foot facility on Jefferson and Linden. It's maxed out. When there's freezing temperatures, they have overfill shelters. So this should take place, and hopefully with all of the precautions, security measures, development costs, this is a world-class facility that provides a need for the community. But unfortunately, on North College, for those business owners and homeowners, they're not super excited if you're right around a quarter-mile radius of that location. Now, I wanted to end this video with some OG pros and OG cons, because now go watch the original video and then ask questions, comments, and engage, because those do change over time, but some of them are absolutely going to be now and forever into the future. So I'm gonna run down a list and I don't wanna miss them, but let's go. We've got approximately 300 days of sunshine annually. It is one of the best pieces of infrastructure for snow. I'm recording this during a snowy day, and tomorrow we're supposed to have some sun in the forecast, and all that snow is gonna be gone. So 300 days of sun is pretty solid. The proximity to mountains, rivers, and skiing destinations. One thing that I've done recently is activities to do in Northern Colorado during winter. There is no shortage of things to do here in Fort Collins, Northern Colorado, whether it be spring, summer, fall, or winter, and they're all within at least 15 to 25 minutes, but then on the back end, 3.5 hours if you want to get yourself to Steamboat for some world-class skiing. A population size that offers ample amenities while maintaining a small town feel. 180,000 people in Fort Collins. There's still a lot of people that know each other. It's not necessarily Mayberry by any means. Northern Colorado, which is Larimer County and Weld County, are growing to nearly 1 million people in the next 20 or so years. So it is this growing area, this tri-city between Fort Collins, Loveland, and Greeley that are seeing some substantial growth. But with that, some world-class amenities that are being built. Martin Lind is working on projects. There are projects like the ranch and lots of different things like the Future Sports Legends Park, which unfortunately is kind of going through bankruptcy, but it is exciting for if somebody picks that up, the torch, and moves forward with it. But whether you're anywhere in Northern Colorado, yes, population growth is not always exciting, but with that comes some pretty awesome amenities that we get to enjoy now. Low crime rates contribute to a strong sense of safety. Yes, I would still say for all intensive purposes, walking anywhere and everywhere in Fort Collins feels safe. Now, if you're gonna be out somewhere at 2 a.m., in a dark alley, yeah, probably not the best of decisions. You're just asking for potential trouble. But overall, I think Chief Jeff Swoboda, who is on the Fort Collins Fellows, has got a great vision and how to keep Fort Collins safe now and into the future. We are always reviewed as one of the brew capitals of the world. In the United States, definitely, but we got the OG brewers in New Belgium and Odell's, Coopersmith, Zwei, Equinox, Horse and Dragon, Funkworks. The list goes on, and a lot of them have been in business for many, many years. And fortunately, Fort Collins is seen as that, as a microbrew capital of the United States, and definitely proud of that. And our last pro that we're gonna, before we hit all the rest of the cons, is our line of sight. One of the things that happened is in the 60s, there was an ordinance that said any and every new development that take place has to be ungrounded. And then a couple, probably 10, 20 years later, they said, you know what? Let's underground all electrical utilities. So when you're driving through Fort Collins and you're seeing why is it so beautiful here? Well, what you don't see is just as important as what you see. You see the mountains, you see the sunsets, you see the 300 days of sun, but what you don't see is the electrical lines overhead throughout the city of Fort Collins proper. 99% as of 2006, electrical lines are undergrounded in Fort Collins. Now, what are some common cons? We are ending the video on a negative, so I'm sorry. But at the end of this video, if you've enjoyed it, give me a comment, a thumbs up. If you're not subscribed to the channel, please subscribe, especially if you're considering relocating to the area. Give my team and I a call, text, or email. We would love to be an asset on your team. But the final cons, here we go. Summer hailstorms. I hate hailstorms. I actually hate most weather. I hate below freezing days because of freezing pipes. I hate hail. I hate strong winds. I have found as I get older, maybe I get a little bit more anxious and so live by the seat of your pants type of feeling. But we do have hail here in northern Colorado. Mostly gonna happen during the summer, and it's not fun. You might get a new roof, but your car might get dinged up, or you're still gonna have to go through the headache and hassle of fixing back up your house or car if you happen to get hit. Now, on the bright side, generally speaking, you could expect a hailstorm in your area, probably a significant hailstorm in your area every 7 to 10 years. When I bought my house, it was a 20-year-old roof without any prior hail damage. In 2016 is when I bought it. In 2019, we had a hailstorm, replaced it. I haven't had a hailstorm yet. Dry climate with drought risks. Yeah, we are a dry desert here, and we do have watersheds that are stable and strong, but we are protecting them as a city. But there are definitely going to be years in the future, and we've had years in the past where you're gonna have watering restrictions. They're pushing for the city of Fort Collins to lessen the amount of turf in the areas, allow for natural grasses, xeriscapes, and opportunities for us to use less water on turf. But it is something that the city of Fort Collins is working towards and working on, is being drought resistant, but we live in a desert, and it's something to take into consideration when we have very sparse years of rain. Perceived traffic congestion, and definitely along I-25. I would say the majority of people would agree that the traffic on I-25 is not awesome, not fun, but Fort Collins is all about perspective. If you're coming from an area like Houston or Los Angeles, New York, Boston, parts of Texas, Florida, you are not gonna see any traffic here in Fort Collins. But if you're coming from a place like Indiana, parts of Indiana, growing up here in Fort Collins, or the Eastern Plains in Colorado, yes, it feels like traffic is here in Fort Collins, but that's all a perception. We've already talked about it, but high housing costs. We still have a high housing cost to income ratio, and hopefully that income ratio to housing costs will decrease over time, but it's just a desirable place to live. People want to be here, and there are people with money moving here that can afford the location comparatively to maybe where they are coming from. The nearest major airport is an hour away. We do have the Fort Collins Loveland Airport that could potentially see commercial airlines in the next 5-10 years. But yes, if you are making a trip, it's gonna be an hour away. You're gonna have to go along I-25, E-470, but it is one of the most busy airports in the United States, which is DIA, and you can connect to all over the country and world from that airport. So while it is an hour away, you do have opportunities to connect everywhere. Now, I did a video on this, but limited public transportation. The public transportation in Fort Collins is not awesome. They are working on things like the Elizabeth Bus Rapid Transit System, the BRT system that's been approved. It's gonna be a $100 million project, exciting. But overall speaking, I did a video on this. The public transportation in Fort Collins is so-so at best. If you are needing to get to a location and be there all day, you can absolutely rely on that public transportation. If you're up and down the Max Transit line, it is reliable. But if you have any of its off-shooting routes, definitely plan buffers, to say the least. Now, with a community of only 180,000 people, even though we're growing with Larimer County and Weld County nearly 1 million people over the next 20 years or so, we still have pretty limited fine dining and cultural options for food. But I will say that people have moved here from out of state, like Houston. They say actually we punch above our weight for dining and cultural food options. But If you're coming here and expecting 10 different Thai places, you might not necessarily get that, but you will have at least some options. And our final con, we are going to talk about wind and wildfires. It's just a part of the world these days. Colorado, California, Los Angeles, hopefully everyone there is starting to work on the rebuild and going to be safe. And it's a fact of life that Colorado has wildfires. We are excited on the years that we don't. I can name basically two big years, 2021 and 2013. We had some pretty significant wildfires. Now, every year we'll have small ones and it's not exciting, it gets fearful, but living in Fort Collins, we at least feel safe. But then you have things happen like that in Los Angeles, or the Marshall Fire down in Boulder. So it is a way of life. It is it's a consideration of life living in Colorado, a dry, arid climate. And on those summers, hopefully the citizens, the community, they're all respectful, watching those fire danger signs, high, medium, low, and taking needed precautions when necessary. Now, those are the extensive list of cons, pros, and the pros and cons specific to 2025. I hope you've enjoyed this video as much as I enjoyed recording it, because overall, I love learning about our community, love sharing what I know about our community with you. And if you have any questions, feel free to ask in the comments below. But until next time, take care.